change I'm going to make is recognizing that we have some members from the Girl Guides here. Instead of, unless you want to, but instead of making you wait through the entire meeting for us to discuss that agenda item, we'll move that up in the agenda. So hearing no other changes from council, motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Thorburn, Deputy Mayor Tanner, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Announcements from members of council. Anything, I mean, I know what I'm going to talk about, but Councillor Frazier.
Yes, Your Worship. I have a couple announcements with regards to the museum. So this Saturday, September 15th, is open house from 2 to 4. So please join the new museum director. All are welcome, free admission, sweets and treats, lemonade, learn about upcoming events. So once again, that's this Saturday. Also at the museum, Ada's Heritage Tea Party is coming up the end of the month, Saturday, September 29th at the museum. That will be from 2 to 4. You can contact the museum to get your tickets, which are $10 each and are available now. Okay.
Great, thank you. Councillor Graves.
If I may, the United Way of Lunenburg County, in partnership with the Salvation Army, is collecting coats for kids, teens, and adults too. So during the month of September, simply drop your gently used wash coats off at the center court of the Bridgewater Mall and self-hang on the appropriate coat racks. In early October, we're going to work with the community and the non-profits to ensure that people that need a warm winter coat get a warm winter coat this year. So thanks for your support.
That's great, thank you. Councillor McDonald.
I just wanted to mention an event coming up, and it's actually two events that are coming together. The Bridgewater Skate Park Committee will be hosting the second Skate of the Art. So this takes a number of blank skateboard decks and puts them in the hands of local artists who come up with some pretty incredible designs. Last year's event was very successful, and this year we hope to auction them off and do better than last year and put that money towards the skate park, which is an extremely well-used facility, and we'd like to keep that ball rolling. So come down, check it out. You're welcome to just wander through and check it out as an installation as part of Afterglow, or place a bid and take a pretty unique piece of art home with you. The event is on September 29th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. and running until 11. And if you haven't been to Afterglow, you have to come for that as well, because it's a pretty incredible event.
Great, thank you. Today we had a very exciting announcement from the province of Nova Scotia in partnership with Maritime Bus and of course all the towns in the region and as well as Municipality District of Lunenburg. Today was the launch of a regional transit system that will connect Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, Bridgewater, Chester to Halifax, Hubbards, Halifax and beyond, and this I'll also add that Queens, their transit system will link up with this one, so it truly is a South Shore regional system. This is huge for our community. There are people that we know and of course people that we don't know that are housebound, have lost their ability to drive either through their for medical reasons or for economic reasons, and this opens up many doors for them to be able to get to appointments in Bridgewater or Halifax, to get around the community, enjoy the restaurants around the region that perhaps they can't because they can't afford a taxi and they can't afford a car. So it was a very exciting announcement. Over $380,000, I believe, was the total that the province is investing in this. This is the first of what I understand to be a model that will be replicated in other areas around the province as they roll public transit out. So it was really a very exciting conclusion, I would say, to an effort put together by Citizens for Public Transit well over a decade ago. And to see Norm Hazlitt come off the first bus, a gentleman that has basically devoted his life to bringing transit to Lunenburg County, to see him come off that bus with that smile, you're never going to take that smile off his face. It was moving, and as we know from the success of Bridgewater Transit, where 20,000 people in less than a year have been moved around our town, through Bridgewater Transit, we know that this regional system will be successful. So very exciting day today for our community. Any other announcements? No, all right. Moving down, we have a proclamation. It is actually it's for the week of September 24th to 30th is the Right to Know Week in the town of Bridgewater, and this is where we join other Canadian jurisdictions and democracies around the world acknowledging International Right to Know Week. Probably take it for granted that meetings like this are public and open, and we're streaming it live on Facebook, and so people have access to what we say here and the decisions we make. I think we take for granted that there's a lot of places around this world that they don't. So the week of September 24th to 30th is Right to Know Week in the town of Bridgewater. Next item is delegations. Are there any members of the public? We don't have any scheduled delegations, but we do have a time where people from the public can come and speak for 2 minutes on a topic. Is there any members of the public that wish to come down and speak on anything? Yes.
We have a delegation of about 10 citizens in the Glen Elm subdivision, and we'd like to come down and talk to you for 2 minutes.
Perfect. Do you want to come to the podium and just...
Do you want everyone to come down?
It's up to you. You can be their spokesperson, I guess, if you'd like.
Well, I've got a big mouth. And we're talking about the rats in Bridgewater.
Perfect. Could you just give us your name as well?
Kathy Agnew,
Thank you, Kathy.
and I live on Naphthal Drive. And we don't know what to do with the rats on our street. One day I saw 7 of them. What can be done?
We can talk about what we're doing. So we know that there's a rat problem in town. This is replicated in, I'm going to say, every town in the province. The nice weather doesn't help. The mild winters don't help. Construction doesn't help. The other issue is people who don't sort their waste, right? You're putting food waste in a garbage bag.
We've heard all this.
Yeah.
We've all talked to Graham. We've all talked to Patrick. I talked to you last week on
Yep.
the street. None of us have bird feeders out. None of us have our garbage problem. We don't know why we have rats. I have a fenced-in yard, and I don't want to let my little dogs out. I'm scared they're going to corner a rat.
Yeah, so their food source would be somewhere in the community. From what we understand, they travel only about 70 feet from their food source. So if there's rats in the community, they're getting food somewhere.
So I was talking to Linda Mader. She lives on Kidd Street. She called me just before I came here, and she talked to Graham, and Graham has agreed to put traps out at the end of Kidd Street where the property belongs to Bridgewater. And he said he was going to do that tomorrow.
Okay.
So traps can be put out, I guess.
Yeah, so we can't put traps on private property. So
I know.
we can't come onto anyone's land and put traps. We do have traps all around the town on public land. We actually hired a professional to, I guess, research where they were, where the rats were congregating,
And
where it
they
would be
did that
most
behind the
effective.
Mader's house on Kidd Street.
Yeah, and so we're doing what we can on our land. We do know that there are many people in this community who still have bird feeders. A bird feeder is essentially a rat feeder.
Yeah.
It's not helping. Actually, we shouldn't be feeding birds. We don't have to go.
Yeah.
We don't have to go down there. But if you have a bird feeder in any part of the town, you're feeding rats on your property and your neighbor's property. And again, if you're not sorting your garbage, they'll get through the plastic. If you're putting your garbage out 2 or 3 days before garbage day, again, it's an opportunity for them to get in there.
I've put out rat poison, but I'm scared to do that because of my dogs.
Yeah.
So this morning I saw a rat in my backyard. Like, I have grandchildren and I don't want them in my yard. For 2 weeks I had company and they looked out my front lawn and said, "Look, there's a rat." How embarrassing is that?
I honestly, I don't know what else to tell you. done what well, we're not gonna say done all we can, but we've educated the public. We put it in our Bridge newsletter, I think a few editions ago, explaining, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. We've put it on Facebook, we've discussed it at council, it's been in the paper. We can continue to do that. I know you and I had a discussion about going door to door.
I'll go door to door and get
talking
money
to
for a
people.
Pied Piper.
Yeah, like, we know we need to do something. We're doing what we can on the public land. I don't know what else we can do, short of telling people again to, don't feed the birds and sort your garbage, and it's an uphill battle if we don't all do our part. I'm glad to hear that Graham is going to put some traps on the public land in that area.
Yeah.
And hopefully, I would assume that he'll report back and let us know how that goes. I don't know, did you have anything you wanted to add, Mr. McCollum?
I just don't know what to do when you see 7 rats in one day. That's unacceptable for a resident in a subdivision.
So, as the mayor said, this was something that that council had asked staff to look at around the spring. I can't remember exactly when. And we brought back a report, recommended, it was included in the budget to start a trapping program on public lands, which we're doing. And, certainly we would continue to move around traps as needed based on experience, not expecting that to be a one-year and done, that will be a ongoing service that we'll have to do, as well as continuing to educate. The thing that I would encourage is obviously there's professionals. I'm not a professional on this.
I hired them last summer.
Okay, well, and so they, I would assume, provide advice on what sort of things you're able to do in your property to keep them away
He
from
put
there.
live traps underneath my deck, but he didn't catch anything.
Okay.
So they must be smart rats.
They are
I don't
unfortunately
know.
very smart animals. Just to give you an example, I put a trap out, I caught one, and I was told I have to wash it with soap and water and then bleach it, because they're smart enough to know that a rat was trapped in that and not to go back to it. I mean, that's
Well, I'm
amazing.
concerned because every 21 days, they give birth.
Oh.
So if you have like 30 rats in your neighborhood and half of them are female and they're all giving birth with every 21 days, no wonder I see 7 rats in one day.
And unfortunately, all it takes is if one, again, I go back to the bird feeder, if one house somewhere is feeding them, that is impacting a neighborhood. And if that's replicated throughout the town, and again, not just our town, it's every town, if that's replicated, then they're just breeding constantly and they have a lot of food and for very little effort.
So can something be put in the paper or just so that the whole town knows what to do for rats?
Yep, we can do that, yep,
Okay.
for sure. So the CAO will make a note of that, and we'll increase our education on rodent mitigation, I guess we'll call it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, appreciate you coming down.
I'll add something to what she said too.
Can you do me a favor, just come down to the microphone? Just because we are,
Here's another resident of Glen
All right.
Allen subdivision.
just want to make sure that the audio is captured for those who might not be able to make it today.
I live on Nassau Drive also, and right next to her. But I've been successful in trapping them. I've trapped 2 already, and both in the same trap, without putting in the trap. But where do I get rid of them?
That's a good question.
Good question. I mean, I got them. I want to get rid of them. And I don't want them around anymore. But I still have my trap set. It's a homemade trap, but it works.
So I like,
I don't know. I can get that information and get back to you. I don't.
so we'll make sure that goes out as part of the, if we put something in the paper, because that's a
If you can put
good
a
question.
disposal area somewhere, I can take it there and drown it if I have to.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't want to suggest in error where they should go.
Well,
No.
as long as they go off my property.
Yeah, no, that's, but that's a very good question. We'll get that information. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address council on that subject or any other subjects? Yes, do you want to come down to the podium, please? And if you wouldn't mind just giving us your name as well, please. Thank you.
Peggy Miller.
Thank you, Peggy.
I think I might be at the wrong meeting. I was informed that there was going to be the topic of Brookside Cemetery walking, and it would be at this meeting, but it's not, I don't see it on the agenda.
No, it's not on our agenda tonight.
Okay, well, when I phoned the administrative officer, whoever it was, had told me that the meeting was tonight and that that was on it, so to be sure and come in.
No, it's not on.
Okay.
That was me. I expected we'd be back by now, but we'll be back shortly.
Okay, it will be back again? Like,
Yeah.
we'll visit that again?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
First meeting in October?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second Monday in October, it will be on the agenda.
Second Monday in October. Okay, thank you.
One way or another.
Good.
Sandra's going to get contact information. Any other members of the public that wish to come and speak to council? No? Hearing none, as promised, why don't we recognize a member of the guides are here. Why don't we discuss the item of surplus property declaration at 93 Dominion Street, which is the Girl Guide cabin. Documents are before you. I'm going to turn it over to the CAO to give us a little background on that, if you don't mind, Mr. McClellan.
Sure. So, council, you have before you a recommendation to declare the property at 93 Dominion Street surplus and provide the net proceeds of the sale to Girl Guides Canada. As a brief bit of background, the property was deeded to the town in 1935 for the exclusive use of the guides. A cabin was built there around that time, and in 1974 the current structure was provided. A couple of years ago, council asked staff to work with the Girl Guides on a facility agreement. Some work was started to find other uses or potential other user groups, and some funding was obtained to do some work such as the wheelchair ramp that's there currently. There is not a robust demand for this space. As well, it is competing against other space such as the LCLC, HB Studios, churches, museum. So last year we met with the guides looking for a contribution to the expenses to the building. We started with an ask of approximately $7,500 a year. Now, recognizing the guides have been contributing to the contributing towards the operation of the museum for quite some time. That was,
Cabin, you mean?
what did I say?
Museum.
Sorry, wrong building. That was quickly determined to be out of the question. And the question turned to how to achieve a financially sustainable future for both the town and the Girl Guides. And three options were identified, which were discussed at a April 19th meeting with representatives from Girl Guides Canada, local guiders, provincial and provincial staff through the organization. Basically, three options were looked at. The town would be happy to give the property to the Girl Guides. We'd be happy to give it to someone else to provide it to the Girl Guides. We also discussed the option of, because there is space in town, we'd be happy to provide the net proceeds of a sale to Girl Guides. Those options were discussed, and the consensus at that meeting was to proceed with the disposition. In June, we received notice through Girl Guides Canada from their legal representative to commence the process to clear the title and start disposition with the proceeds to go to the Girl Guides. So the recommendation before you has been worked with both by Girl Guides Canada and the town. This has been a long process, and the decision to make the property surplus has been thought through. The recommendation will help support a thriving Girl Guides with not only this contribution, but without the necessity to fund the facility maintenance for the years to come. Funds will go to the girls and their experiences. So it also supports the financial sustainability of the town, with the outcome for both parties being positive.
Questions from council? Someone want to put a motion on the floor and then discuss it, debate it?
I would move that the town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and declare PID 6002978 surplus to town requirements, and further direct staff to list the property for sale as at the soonest opportunity, and that net proceeds of the sale, price less real estate and legal fees, be paid to the Girl Guides of Canada.
Got a seconder, please? Seconder from Mayor Tanner. Discussion.
You
Councillor
mentioned that
Briggs.
the money's going to the Girl Guides of Canada. How much of that stays local, do we know? Was that part of the discussion?
So through the mayor to council, so that is between the Girl Guides to determine, but it was discussed at that meeting that 80% of the proceeds would go towards the provincial office, and that they have a process for the funds. So that would be their process for how they would distribute the money.
Councillor McDonald.
It sounds to me like some of the troops have already found another location, and some are still looking for a location. Are town staff still working with them to make sure everybody finds a home, a suitable home?
So town staff would make it a priority to assist if there's a need, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Further question? Councillor Frazier?
Yeah. To date, there hasn't been an assessment of the building as far as the fair market value. Would you feel that there's a required assessed or appraised value done before it's put on the market?
So through the mayor to council, that's actually a requirement of Girl Guides Canada, and we've retained a appraisal, which was visited on Friday, so I should have
Okay.
an appraisal before the property's put to market.
Okay.
Councillor Thorburn?
I guess my only question is, are the Girl Guides at Usick Cabin satisfied with that decision? Has there been some to sell the property?
I mean, my understanding is that these discussions have been ongoing for some time, and so the national level of guiding, the provincial level, and the local level have had these discussions with the town to get us to this point. As the CAO said, we offered to give them the building or give someone else the building to try to keep them in that facility, and I believe that we were prepared to not have to make this decision until next year. And it was guides nationally or provincially that said it should be now. So I don't think anyone's really happy, because this is sad, but you have an aging piece of infrastructure that the operating costs are approximately $9,000 a year. It needs between $10,000 and $20,000 a year in capital over the next 5 to 10 years. We don't have that money. Guides don't have that money. There are certainly better things to use their money for, like their programming, than to have to pay for heat and lights and all the infrastructure that goes into it. So the long way to answer your question is I don't think anyone's really happy, but as some of the troops have already moved out, and I think there was an understanding, at least from Guides Canada, that this was inevitable, and this has happened across the country as they've divested of other buildings that they've owned.
Okay, well, that's great.
Any other discussion?
Question?
Hearing none. Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We'll go up to the minutes of the August 13th, 2018 Town Council meeting. They are before you. Any questions, comments, errors, or omissions? No? Hearing none, we'll deem the minutes as approved. Planning items, Smart City Challenge update 2018. Turn it over to our
Turn it over to Leon.
planning staff.
Leon has a bit of a presentation for you, but it will be brief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. You'll be pleased it's only a 35-minute presentation.
I love you.
So we've been producing monthly updates on our Smart Cities Challenge process, very exciting process, no doubt, that is starting to generate some buzz in the community. In the September update, we had a number of important things we wanted to communicate to you, so we thought that we'd do a short presentation, less than 35 minutes, to convey that. So of course, our challenge statement is that our community will lift 20% of its population out of energy poverty by 2028. That's been very well received by Infrastructure and Communities Canada and has put us in the running for the $5 million prize, the Smart Cities Challenge Prize. And the idea is that we're combining that very important social need with our community energy investment plan and using clean energy as a way to achieve this goal. I'll just point out briefly that the Smart Cities Challenge project lines up really well with a number of important outcomes and initiatives that Council wants to put through this year. So there's good connection with with several of our initiatives and the work that the Planning and Recreation Department in particular is doing. One of the document that's attached to the staff report is the Smart Cities Challenge Project Charter. And that lays out some of the foundational way forward for the project, and we wanted to provide that to Council so that you have a good idea of what the community is seeing with regard to this program. The outline on the screen there are the major topic areas covered in the charter. This is the kind of information that we're bringing to all of our community and regional partners. We anticipate having a very active group of partners of over 20 organizations that we'll be working together with to produce this ambitious plan that we hope will win the $5 million prize. And we thought it was important that we work closely with our partners and ensure that they have all the right information. The document includes our objective, which is, of course, to win the prize, but beyond that, it also affirms the town's commitment toward working on the issue of energy poverty, even if we don't win that prize. So the best use of our current resources and all this energy is to do something that we can do, that we can implement regardless of whether we win that prize or not. And we're actually confident that we can create something that meets that. The outcomes have been reiterated a couple of times now, so I won't go over that in detail, but it's still true to what was proposed as part of our initial proposal to Infrastructure Canada. The timeline has shifted somewhat from some of the earlier materials that Council has seen. We waited until August for the guide to be released that actually told us what they wanted to receive from us. So there was a bit of lag time this summer. I really enjoyed my summer vacation as a result. But now we have a very aggressive plan to meet that target for March 5th, which is what we're heading toward. The project team is also growing. In addition to the 3 staff at the top of the list there, we are just finalizing the hiring process for the Energy Finance and Development Coordinator, 2-year term position that Council's approved, and the on-site energy manager, which will be an energy engineer working through Efficiency Nova Scotia. All of those individuals, with myself as the project lead, will steward the process over the next 6 months. We've already brought on board a number of other individuals and are working with working to bring on 2 additional consultants as well. And of course, all of that is enabled through the $250,000 grant that the town is receiving. And that's a net zero impact on this year's budget. In terms of community engagement, that's one of the things I wanted to focus on this evening. We've been trying to put together a plan to really figure out the best way to engage the community. This wheel identifies some of the key stakeholders in the community that we want to engage, and we're coming up with a strategy to engage each different spoke of that wheel separately. And I'll talk about a few of those this evening. But the engagement plan is coming together, and it's being supported by a communications plan so that all of our stakeholders are adequately informed as we roll forward with this process. So a couple of quick points. So key community stakeholders are being invited to join what we're calling the Community Working Group. So this will be primarily based out of organizations that support low-income residents and vulnerable residents in the community. They include groups such as United Way, the Housing Support Workers, YMCA Lunenburg County, and a number of other organizations that Council is familiar with because we've done lots of projects with them in the past. We've tentatively scheduled our first kickoff meeting with that group for September 27th, and invitations are going out as we speak. In order to support the communications effort to these groups, Picnic Studios is being retained to provide that online and media effort as well, and in order to produce a high-quality 5-minute pitch video, which has to go toward Infrastructure Canada, and we now know that that's a requirement based on the guide that we've received, so we think they'll be an excellent partner to work with on this project. Another one is the Heartwood Centre for Community Youth Development, which will deliver an at-risk youth engagement and video documentation project. So they'll be working actively with youth that come from a number of, from an at-risk background, and will be documenting the process. And they'll be out and about in the community and doing video documentary work, and that will be part of the communications material that we put out and will inform our pitch as well. That work is being co-funded by the Department of Community Services, who we anticipate having a great relationship with in this process. And we'll be retaining a professional facilitator to assist with community engagement work. As far as council is concerned, we've identified a number of ways that council can have opportunities to support the community engagement effort, and I'll just separate that a bit from the technical work. So there's a lot of consultants and people with more PhDs than I have helping to pull together this very ambitious plan. What council can support with, not to say anything about your number of PhDs you have, but in order to just emphasize that we really feel that council's role in this, should you choose to take it on, is to assist with community engagement. So first of all, by championing and voicing strong public support for the project, both within Bridgewater and beyond. Council's been doing that, so please continue. Engaging with the media is an important part of that. We can also really use your support in inviting stakeholder organizations and participants to join the process. It'll be particularly important as we form the community working group and engaging landlords in the community as well, who will need to be part of the solution. And a special thank you to Michael Graves for the leadership that he's shown in that work already. Liaising. It may be helpful for members of council to liaise specifically with certain key organizations within the community, just to keep the two-way dialogue going. That can support staff and take a little bit of that pressure off staff as well. So if that's something that you're passionate about, if there's certain organizations you'd like to connect with, we can definitely add you to the roster for those. Under disseminate, please use your personal networks and especially social media to bring project information and engagement opportunities to the community. There will be a number of community surveys and polls, meeting notices, etc. Please actively and aggressively use your channels to circulate those. We'll really need that support. And finally, participate. So please attend meetings and events and maintain public visibility so that we can the project can be well represented. And lastly, all of the Smart Cities Challenge communities have a responsibility to connect with their First Nations partners. So staff recommends that council initiate formal contact with our First Nations partners, including our local band, which is Acadia First Nation, and we'll be putting together a bit of a process for through the mayor's office and the CAO to pursue in that regard. But that's kind of a new. We don't often get a requirement to really work with First Nations group, but because this is a national initiative and has national significance, we're required to do that. So we think it's also a great opportunity to build new relationships with our First Nations communities. Just briefly on financial, we are in the process of finalizing the grant agreement with Infrastructure Canada, and as a result of that $250,000 inflow, we will need the capital budget to be increased for CEIP implementation from $244,000 to $494,000 in order to reflect that expenditure. That will not, and this is important, result in a net increase in the town's expenditure. That's an in and an out. So just to sum things up, under recommendations, request from staff to council to please increase the capital budget for that item as described, and to initiate formal engagement with the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq and Acadia First Nation. I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Questions from members of council? As we move right along with the Smart Cities Challenge, it's just, the building is abuzz with activity as we work towards, as Leon said, lifting 20% of our population out of energy poverty, which is no small feat, but will be something that will be nationally and internationally replicated, I'm sure. Must have been a really good update, no question.
A lot of information.
All right. I guess you're off the hook. You sure? You don't want to ask many questions? Thank you.
Everything's just so clear.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So council's not going to make any motions?
We thought this was just an update tonight. We can.
There should be motions in the council package.
So there's a request to increase the capital budget by the
Someone like to move that we
$250,000.
Increase capital budget for the community and energy investment plan from $244,000 to $294 to enable the expenditure of the Smart Cities Challenge grant from the Government of Canada. Moved by Deputy Mayor Tanner, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion, Councillor McDonald.
I think we missed the part about Acadia First Nation, about engaging them. Did you include that?
Do you want that in the same motion?
The motion is as, so staff recommends that Bridgewater Town Council, and then those are the two motions.
Okay, two separate motions?
Two separate
Okay.
motions, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Deputy Mayor
I move
Tanner.
that town council initiate formal agreement with the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq and Acadia First Nation.
Thank you, seconder. Councillor Frazier. She beat you to it, buddy.
I'll get on the pickleball.
Question.
Any further questions being called? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I should note before we go to the public hearing, Bert, that Councillor McGinnis is not here. Obviously, you can see that he's not here, but he doesn't miss very many meetings, but he's away due to a family matter. Our next item is public hearing rezoning from single-unit residential R1 to two-unit residential R2 at 75 Pinehurst, and as this is a public hearing, sorry?
Seems to be a question of the gallery.
Yes?
When was the time to comment on the Girl Guide cabin topic? I didn't know if that was the space you gave the public to speak before. I thought that was for topics that weren't already scheduled in the agenda.
Yeah, so the time for any public input was at when I called for delegations to see if someone had any topics they wished to discuss.
I thought it was, did you gesture to the part of the council to discuss it, but I thought then after that you would give the public a chance if anybody wanted to speak after the council discussed it.
No, unfortunately, the way that the process works is the public has a chance at the beginning of the meeting to talk about any of the topics that they have, and then once the meeting progresses, then the discussion is confined to council and staff.
Is there any way I could still
I don't imagine anyone has any objection.
No.
No, everyone's okay with that. No. You can come down, yes, absolutely.
I apologize.
No, please don't apologize. Listen, it's great that you want to come down and report it. I do want to just advise you, though, that council has made a decision. So we have made a motion and passed that tonight, but you're free to speak, for sure.
I just would like to ask a few questions if possible.
Sure.
When the decision was made, I knew that the council had been in contact with Girl Guides Canada, but it was skipped. We only found out what decision was made after it was discussed. We were the only people, the people who work and care for the building, who didn't get involved in that conversation, and that's very strange to me. Why are the people who work and care for it the people the last people to find out when we came and were told the decision had already been made.
Yeah, do you want to?
So there were, so through the mayor, at that April 19th meeting, there were local, I'm not sure the quite terms, Girl Guides, but there was, I believe, 8 from the Bridgewater area at the meeting, in addition to the national and provincial Girl Guide representatives present.
National and provincial?
Yes.
Because I was told that we didn't have a direct say in the decision, but what it was, like, it may have been the more higher up from the, like, national for the organization Girl Guides of Canada, but we weren't told until the end, like, we didn't have much information at all of being part of the decision to be made and what we do in more detail to care for it in the building.
I'm just trying to get the numbers here.
See, I was just looking up his notes from there were minutes taken, I believe, from that meeting.
Yes, so there was 5 local representatives from the local guiders that were in that meeting. I wouldn't be able to speak for Girl Guides Canada with regards to the discussions that the organization had internally.
There's also a hierarchy in the organization on who has the final say, national, provincial, and local. So that structure is within guides, and so it wouldn't be for us to say who gets the final say when it comes to what to do with the building from a guiding perspective.
Yeah,
So,
I'm in current discussion with Girl Guides at the moment.
but
Discussing things like that.
to answer your question, which was a very good question, there was local representation, so they were included in the process.
Okay. Probably was provincial, I'm assuming, around there, but thank you anyways. Another thing I'd like to say is you talked about if the cabin would be sold, there would be profits that would go back to Girl Guides of Canada, and then hoping to support the local district after that, but not much would be in reality left for us locally if it is to Girl Guides of Canada. Like an example, you guys all know we sell Girl Guide cookies, and it's $5 a box. For a whole case is $60. Does anybody know how much money out of one case of cookies that go back to our units?
$5.
It is $11. So it's kind of going to be the same comparison to the cabin being sold and profits going back to Girl Guides of Canada after everyone there kind of gets their piece of the pie. In reality, the support back, the funds back to us will not be anything to brag about for the money that it would provide for us. Considering, like, I don't know all the prices, because, like, when we don't have cabins, what we usually do is we use church halls and other community spaces that are probably a space to work and possibly play, depending on the levels, which they're quite a cost depending on where you go. Actually, it's funny because we were talking about this the other night at a district meeting in Halifax. One location that we were using for a while, the Sacred Heart School of Halifax, that they offered, yeah, we can use it. The price they wanted to start doing was beginning of last year that we had to stop. These were wanting to charge $100 a night. So that's an idea of how much it can grow up to, unless you find a location that is willing to be very generous to how much it charges for organizations to use it on a weekly basis for 3 to 4 nights a week for the funds in that case. And also, I'd like to point out, on the article that was sent out, I was the one who proposed the article in the newspaper. That was me. And the information from me combined with contact with the town and Girl Guides about the estimates of the cost to repair the building was greatly exaggerated. Especially, I thought it was funny that you're saying that the cabin is in need of renovations, you're saying to be fit to use?
Well, it wasn't fit to use, but there's work that needs to be done. For example, we did the ramps for accessibility.
But those were done with grants that
Yeah, so there's not grants for
Partially.
everything. Partially done for grants and partially done with the money that the town provided. So there's a requirement to replace the exterior cladding, replace the main entrance window, upgrade the lighting, install a more energy efficient heating system, replace heaters, upgrade circuit breakers, replace interior walls and insulation, roofing to make the first floor barrier free.
But some of those things aren't necessary. They're
So
luxury things.
Some things become necessary when a building is owned by the town. We have requirements, barrier-free requirements, so there's some things we can't avoid.
Because I believe it was mid-August that I came in by myself to talk to the building engineers below us. The actual guy who appraises them and like for the safety and if they're well enough to use, he was out on another job, so I left a message with the secretary to email me about what would be the things that needed to be upgraded, because we were told we would need upgrades, but we weren't actually told what. So I left a message with her, and he got back to me 2 days later of, again, I asked what specific things need to be upgraded. You might tell him to email me back what they were, because I was looking at costs. And he emailed me back saying that the building was fine the way it was. And he knew what building I was referencing to, the Girl Guide building. But he emailed me back saying it was in running order.
Which is correct. The building is in running order, but a building that's in running order doesn't mean that it doesn't need improvements in the future. And so the list we have spread out over many years. So the part that I was frustrated with in the article is that it did make it look like $100,000 worth of repairs was needed on the building today. That's not a fact. The reporter, unfortunately, even though she had the breakdown of all the costs, chose to present it as one lump sum. It goes back to the earlier statement I made in the meeting where even without repairs, the operational costs of this building are $9,000 a year. Then you do need to do some work, you do need to do some upgrades to the building. So you're still talking $9,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year for a building that's exclusively for the use of one group. And we did try to have other groups come in to see if they would be willing to partner. None of them found it suitable for their use because we were desperately hoping to have someone else share the costs to make the building more sustainable, and it just didn't work. And to the CAO's point at the beginning, you're competing against spaces in churches and schools and the LCLC and the field house that are multi-use spaces that can have many service groups. And so it just got to a point where it's a large cost for one group, and when we presented it to guides, it was something that nationally, provincially, and locally was deemed something that was not sustainable for the future of guides to remain in that building. All your fundraising would have to go to pay for just these without any program.
Well, how have we lasted this long then? Because we have sustained the building for years and years now. And we have made upgrades in the past, like with your help, we managed to get the ramp in the bathroom, which was amazing. Thank you very much. When we've done painting and we've done other like repairs over time, we fundraise for these things and spread out over time. Again, not $100,000 like tomorrow, but over time we do work especially hard to do these things with many events that we do, splitting it between the cabin and programming. And we are prepared to fight for that.
I know it's difficult. as I said, we have made a decision. We were instructed by the legal team from Guides Canada to proceed with the sale. There was no interest from Guides as an association to keep the building. We can't fund these costs for one group. We don't provide space, dedicated space we don't provide a building for one group. Scouts, Kinsmen, Rotary, it's not something that we traditionally do. And the state that the building is in, while it is usable now, it does, as it ages, require more costs. And it's just something that where there's other spaces available, and I know it's not your own cabin, but where there's other spaces available, it doesn't make financial sense to remain in the building. And again, your fundraising is all going to have to go to pay for the building itself instead of programming. And I know these decisions are we don't have any fun making these decisions. They're hard decisions. I was a scout leader for 15 years. I know the value of these programs. They can be life-changing for our youth, to give them skills and to give them an outlet that can keep them on a path or put them on a path for success in the future. And I applaud you for coming up and speaking so passionately about this. But at the end of the day, you've got a building that's very, very old that will only need more work as it ages. And again,
That is a rarity.
and this decision went all the way through local, provincial, and all the way up to the national level. And the instructions we were given were, we don't want the building, please sell it. We're hoping that, the assessed value is $171,000. It will be appraised soon. As Mr. McClellan said, 80% of the proceeds go to the provincial level. Doing math in my head, that means 20% of the proceeds would come back to the local level. So with an assessed value of $171,000, I'm not saying it's going to be $171,000, but it's not going to be a $10,000 sale. So I hope that there's a significant amount of money that comes back to Guides at the local level that you guys can put right back into your programming. We're committed to, if there's a struggle finding other space in the community, we're committed to do what we can to find other space in facilities that we own or co-own. But unfortunately, the Girl Guide cabin is just not a sustainable place going forward.
I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense financially, I agree. I will still be in contact with Girl Guides of Canada. I do want to speak with them more. But I guess more of the reason, even more than the financial part of it, that I immediately jumped into this, because it's a rarity to have a building like we have, a 2-story building, to keep all of our stuff in, like our old uniforms and craft supplies. It's about the experience that it provides that is very unique. Usually you use church halls and other locations, but you're adapting to the space, like I said before. You adapt to the space. It's not about having more freedom to really enhance this program that we have, this amazing program. The space provides so many more opportunities.
Yeah. So I hate to cut you off. We do have to move on with our meeting, but let me just say this. I applaud your determination, and I think you absolutely should have a conversation with Girl Guides Canada. It's important that they know that decisions, just like decisions that we make, it's important for us to hear from people like you, not afraid to come up and speak at the podium. By the way, I get so much more nervous when I'm at the podium than I am here. It's not a comfortable place to stand with a television camera at you. So I applaud your courage. And while we've made our decision, you are entitled to answers to your questions. And so I hope that you get those answers from Girl Guides Canada. Can I ask you one more thing? Can we just get your name so we just put it in the minutes?
Michaela Halliday.
Michaela, thank you so much. Okay. You're a great public speaker too, by the way.
Yeah.
I hope you take that and go, what's the number one fear for people? Public speaking. So you did a great job. Okay. We're now moving into a public hearing, and thank you to Mrs. Porterlow for sending me the rules that go with a public hearing. And so we have an agenda, and it is for the rezoning of single unit to 2-unit residential at 75 Pinehurst. And the rules of conduct I'm required to read. The members of council may question each speaker. Speakers will be limited to one presentation. However, council may call upon a speaker for additional comments. Presentations will be limited to 10 minutes each. Each speaker will state name and address. Questions from the floor will be directed to council, not to staff or other individuals, and the presentation by the developer will be limited to 20 minutes. I don't know if the developer is present at this time. Let me scroll back up here. Yeah, so I guess we'll go down to the overview by the planner.
I'd like to invite Mackenzie Childs will be.
Ms. Childs will be.
Yes.
Presenting. Fantastic.
That's right.
Thank you. So the application for 75 Pinehurst Avenue is to request rezoning from single-unit residential, the R1 zone, to 2-unit residential, the R2 zone, to enable a 2-unit residential dwelling. There are no additions to the structure planned, and all interior renovations would be required to ensure building code compliance. So the surrounding zoning is single-unit and 2-unit residential, and there's one special commercial property nearby on Aberdeen, which is the Argyle Inn. The existing surrounding land use is predominantly single-unit dwellings with 3 semi-detached properties on Pinehurst Avenue. The future land use designation of the subject property and the surrounding area is low-density residential, as shown on the future land use map on the screen. This designation is reserved for uses permitted in the single-unit and 2-unit residential zones, and the proposed zoning for the subject property is 2-unit residential. The proposed conversion to a 2-unit dwelling is not permitted under the current single-unit residential zoning unless the dwelling was built prior to August 27th of 1975, but this specific building was built in 1978, so the zoning must change to allow this use. And as shown on the map, the homes in this area were built around this time, but there's a variety of construction years with some built prior to 1975 and others built afterwards. The municipal planning strategy has policies on residential development, which were looked at for this application. Land use conflicts are minimized as the proposed use is considered to be low-density residential, similarly to existing properties in the area. The proposed change provides alternatives to single-unit dwellings, and a conversion from single-unit to 2-unit increases residential densification slightly where there is already existing residential. Policy IM2 is met as the 2-unit residential zone falls within the low-density residential designation of the future land use map. Policy IM3 is met as the proposed use, which is 2-unit residential, is permitted within the R2 zone. Policy IM4 is met as there are no planned expansions to the existing structure, so the zoning standards for the R2 zone are met. And policy IM6 is met with regard given to strategic growth, housing choice, compatibility, adequate services, transportation and traffic, and environmental suitability. And a public participation meeting was held on Wednesday, July 25th at 7 p.m. here in council chambers, where 6 members of the public and the applicants were present. There were some concerns raised regarding the addition of windows and doors at the rear of the building that would affect privacy and to nearby dwellings, and the expansion of the building footprint, but staff clarified that no expansion to the building is planned. Additional concerns were also discussed between property owners at the meeting, and there was we received some written correspondence as well. So the proposed land use bylaw amendment is to rezone 75 Pinehurst Avenue from single-unit residential to 2-unit residential on the zoning map of the land use bylaw as shown on the screen. And staff recommend that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration for the proposed map amendment of the land use bylaw. And if this is approved, there will be notice of approval published in the newspaper, which starts a 14-day appeal period to the Utility and Review Board. A copy of amendments will be sent to Municipal Affairs, and amendments will be effective when the appeal period lapses if no appeals are filed. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just reading my rules and regulations on what we can do next. Overview by the planner. Presentation by the developer is next. Is the developer here?
They are not.
They are not here. Okay. Any comments from members of the public on this particular? Yes, did you want to?
Yes.
No, I sat here quietly.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't see you back there.
Here to answer questions.
Okay. Any questions from members of council?
Yeah.
This one, Councillor Graves?
So generally, if there's a comment made by one of the neighbors, we would get a copy of what the comments were.
Mm-hmm.
In this package, there's no comments in regards to what the neighbors are thinking.
No, so they were included in the last package, and so there wasn't any additional ones. Yeah. So.
And I was on vacation.
Oh.
That's fine. Oh,
Sorry.
fine. Good. So the neighbors are generally in favor?
Yeah, there was some discussion around on the first meeting, and I think they've become in favor after hearing a bit more about it.
Great, thank you.
The questions, if I recall, the concerns were less around the actual structure and more around who could be living in the structure, which is not what not what this is about, right? This is about the actual development itself.
And the ones that were about the structure were about additions that they thought might be planned but weren't going to be planned for it.
So I think that yeah.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Closing remarks by the chairman. It was all addressed in the last meeting. Thank you. It's pretty concise and straightforward, if you ask me. Can I have a motion from council, please? Councillor Frazier.
Yes, Your Worship. That Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater gives second and final consideration to the proposed map amendments of the land use bylaw as contained in Appendix A of document 18-113B and to publish all notices pursuant to Section 210 of the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McDonald. Further discussion? Hearing
Question.
none. Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, our PACE program update and first reading of Chapter 199, the PACE bylaw. Who is, back to Mr. DeVried.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will speak to that. So, apologies for the hefty report. It seems the PACE topic tends to require a lot of verbiage to explain. But this is an important report because staff are recommending amendments to the PACE law, the PACE Property Assessed Clean Energy Program bylaw, of which tonight would be the first reading, should council choose to move forward with that. And also, essentially, I guess the formal approval of the details of the Clean Net Zero program. And I'll just make two comments before I start. Matt Davis is in the room with me as well, and Matt's the program coordinator, so if there's questions about the Clean Net Zero program, I might ask Matt to respond to those. And then the second is that we had an important funding announcement from Natural Resources Canada just last week, awarding the funding for the program, which we actually already knew about a year ago. That's why Matt's been here, but it was still nice to have the formal announcement.
Now Matt can get paid.
Exactly. So essentially, the staff report you have before you, which has a couple of attachments, talks about the Clean Energy Financing Program and then the recommendations for the bylaw and then the Clean Net Zero Program. So I'll just make one or two high-level comments. You'll notice in the discussion section on page 3 that we're providing council with participation rates in the program. You'll know by now that participation rates for the Clean Energy Financing Program are low, substantially lower than staff anticipated, and in fact lower than any of the municipal units anticipated. The District of Lunenburg has done well. They had a good size waiting list for year one. but all the units are anticipating increased program uptake, and Clean Foundation, who manages our program, is working on an aggressive marketing program to really try to boost the numbers this year. And the province has made it's not official yet, but has made movements towards supporting them in that, because they want to see PACE programs thrive as well. On the evaluation of the clean energy financing program, staff has determined that program evaluation, with uptake aside, has been very positive. The program metrics continue to be very good for the program, and participants continue to provide feedback that the program is high quality and that there's generally high satisfaction rates for those who do take part in the program. So again, the people who take part in it are happy. Not enough people are taking part in it. We have a disconnect. And there has been considerable outreach already, so we need to try something new. The administrative evaluation was also positive, leading to a positive overall evaluation. Moving on to the Clean Net Zero program, the information provided here is in response to a very detailed risk analysis and risk scoping study that was performed last fall, and the recommendations of that review have been undertaken and brought into the current program design. The items that are in the staff report in front of you are basically the last outstanding items that the town needs to provide some feedback on in terms of whether the council chooses to accept the recommendations from that work. So very briefly, that the number of years for eligible financing, so the financing term, be extended from 10 years to 15 years for qualifying participants. And I'll just emphasize that that's not going to change the clean energy financing or the base program. That's just for participants in the Clean Net Zero pilot at this point. So even if council chooses to extend the number of years to 15 through the bylaw change that's recommended, the town doesn't actually have to make any program make full use of the 15 years. It just allows up to 15 through the program. Also, that a maximum financing limit be established for the Clean Net Zero program at the lesser of 15% of full assessed property value and $40,000. There is an alternative provided there, which is to keep it at 10% of full assessed property value, which is what the clean energy financing or the base program uses, but it was deemed that there would be significant benefit and acceptable risk to increasing that to 15%, and a larger cap, of course, $40,000. And there are alternatives for council's consideration, but this was deemed to be an appropriate figure for maximizing benefit for the program. Interest rates, the 4% interest rate at which the town currently offers PACE financing is now outdated. Staff is recommending that the PACE financing rate be increased immediately, and that requires currently a change to the bylaw. So staff is also recommending that the financing rate be removed from the bylaw and put into the town's fees policy, which would allow it to be updated much more regularly in the future. There is the draft rates here for 10 and 15-year PACE financing are provided. Staff would intend to bring those rates to council at the second reading of the bylaw. So if we know that council is interested in moving forward with those changes, we would institute that at the next meeting so that there's no gap. You know, it's hard to change the rate now. We'll just change it in the fees policy when it comes to second reading. And finally, that commercial and institutional PACE financing be enabled by a very small wording change in the bylaw, and that's to remove the word homeowner and just change it to property owner, which would allow the town to expand its PACE programs in future. That doesn't mean, again, that anything will change right now. It just removes one administrative hurdle should council choose to go in that direction. And that council will be receiving a full report on opportunities for PACE program expansion later this fiscal year. So in summary, there are three clauses that are recommended for amendment in the PACE program bylaw. Those are spelled out in the staff report. And there is a revised series of recommendations in your council package. And should I read those out? Or Those are on the eScribe system. So we've made some wording changes, thanks to Sandra's catch of some confusing wording in the motions that were recommended in the staff report. And so that revised wording is provided, and recommendation number 2 has been removed from your motions in order to deal with that at the next meeting.
So David
Yes.
got away from me, and I didn't want to interrupt Leon, but my employer is involved in the delivery of the program, and being on the lending team, I think it's a conflict of interest for me to stay here any longer.
Thank you, I appreciate you declaring a conflict. So the second recommendation is being as presented. Okay.
Second recommendation from the report. It is
Okay.
presented cleanly in eScribe.
Perfect, thank you. And for the benefit of the public, this, we talk about PACE, all these acronyms, we get confused as much as anyone on these. This is the program where people can access funding in order to do the energy retrofits for their homes, and this is part of our process to lift 20% of our population out of energy poverty. So, questions from council before we put a motion on the floor? Deputy Mayor Tanner.
Leon, there's no, and I know you talked about risk and so on, factoring that in, but at the $40,000 level, we're not concerned that there's that payback, it's too long of a payback period, so to speak? Does that make sense? My question. You've addressed it in the memo, but it still seems like a lot of money.
It does seem like a lot of
Do you know what I
money.
mean? Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to bring the upper threshold to council, because
Okay.
you need to be able to justify that, right?
Right,
If anybody
right.
asks you, why did you lend $40,000 to this
Right.
one property owner?
Right.
So the way the calculation is going to work for allowing PACE financing is that that would only be if someone got to 40,000, it
Sure.
would be fairly unusual circumstance, frankly.
Right.
First of all, that would have to be up to a maximum of 15% of the property value, so that's quite an expensive property. The second is that they would need to be able to, that $40,000 would need to be completely repaid in energy savings over 15 years.
Right.
Which means that that's a lot of energy savings on an annual basis. It'd be a phenomenal upgrade that would be required to achieve
right,
that, right?
right.
So the way the program is designed is that there's actually several limits in place that
Okay.
limit the amount of financing. It's very unlikely that anybody's going to go that high,
Okay.
frankly, which is why we offered a number even down to 35, because
Right.
we weren't even really sure that it would. But we thought it was just a principled thing to say, let's just cap it somewhere at a reasonable number so nobody questions,
Okay.
so that there's no risk.
Okay.
I don't know if, Matt, if you have any further comment on that.
You have to come down to the microphone.
Matt Davis, I'm the coordinator for the Net Zero program. Leon, I think, summarized it pretty well. It'd be very unlikely for a home
To even
get that
Okay.
amount of money for those upgrades. However, some preliminary plans in the Net Zero program have shown that upgrades in the $40,000 range can pay back with recent changes in rebate programs for solar and non-electric homes. 40,000 upgrades can potentially pay back possibly 15 to 17 years. So while it's unlikely a home that's valued that much in order to get that much money would get that, we could see paybacks for that range
Okay.
in that time.
And if I can add just one more thing. So the town's municipal lien against that property would be a first lien on the property,
Yes,
right?
right.
Ahead of other lending.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it would be 15% or less of the total assessed value.
Right.
Yeah.
Follow-up?
Just more of a comment than anything, and I'm not sure if you've heard it, but of the people I've talked to about this program, there seems to be a perception of, and perhaps nervousness, that they're going to have to reveal too much financial information. And have you had that comment, or has that been
I'll
the
let Matt
topic
take
of
that.
marketing at all, or?
Matt, take that one.
Yeah, I haven't received any
Okay.
concerns like that from homeowners who are currently in the program.
Okay.
That would be-
I'm trying to address it, I guess, with people that bring it up. but-
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Is that for the base program, like the clean energy financing, the base program that the town started with prior to the Clean Net Zero. There is a bit of confusion between the two programs.
maybe,
So the
yeah.
Net Zero program has a higher level of financial
Right.
rigor and review to enter into it
Right.
than the base program does, which is just for general energy efficiency upgrades, not getting you to a net zero where your house
Sure.
is making as much energy as it's consuming.
Right.
Right.
So maybe for us as members of council, when we have those questions, because that's a great question, now we know to ask that clarifying question for the public, just to see which one it is.
And if I could add one thing, there's even confusion between our programs and like Nova Scotia Power's on-bill financing and,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, there's a variety of programs out there. What we try to do, and what Matt's organization tries to do, is they try to stream people through with one number to call. Here's all your options. We'll bundle them all together, right?
Right.
And however, to your point around revealing financial information, so the Clean Net Zero program, we do a credit check on people.
Right.
We make sure that they have the financial ability to pay that all back and to borrow. So there is a higher level of rigor for that program. Yeah.
Further questions? Councillor Thorburn?
Yeah, if I remember rightly, on that PACE program initially was to help low earners income or low, I guess, assessed properties. So I can't see that getting to be $40,000. Most of them is around 100 or 200, would seem to be the range. So that would be 10% or 20 or so thousand that would have a reasonable payback. And their payback was supposed to be enough to pay that money back, right, over a period of time, at no additional cost to the property owner or the tenant. Is that correct?
Exactly. So the way that we describe that is that the program has, which is set by council,
Right.
a policy called the 1-to-1 ratio.
Right.
So the 1-to-1 says that over the lending period, the homeowner has to be cash flow positive or neutral. Okay? So their repayments to the town have to be less than or equal to their energy savings. And one of the important reasons that we've been, we're in year 3 of the main program, the base program, and what we've seen is that, consistently people are coming in well within that threshold. So people are basically have more money in their pocket, right? So that's an important value that's been brought into the Net Zero program as well.
Yes.
Supplement to that, I think if I read there somewhere about 8 applications town had this year in the state.
So
Base?
there's actually two numbers 8. So the base program has had a total of 8 program completions in
Right.
year 1.
Right.
There's an 8 there.
Right, and that 8, let me talk about that first. The maximum number of that, would that have been under the 15,000?
Yes. So year 1, the town lent up to $15,000. Years 2 and 3, the town is actually lending up to $20,000, which was also approved by council. I don't believe that we've had I don't believe we've had significant uptake over 15. I think we've been basically hitting 15, but I would have to check to see if there was any amount larger than that.
What numbers would be the best for the motion?
Right.
If we have choices.
So what's also different is that if we increase the lending period to 15 years, right, it means that those savings can accrue over a longer period of time, which means that deeper energy upgrades can be afforded. So by extending the lending period, you can also extend the amount of financing that's offered, the total.
Okay, just one question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Happy?
Further questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Don't all jump at once.
Yeah, sorry.
Or at least we can deal with the first motion, and then if you have further questions before we put the second one on the floor, we can do that.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the intent of amended Chapter 199 Property Assessment Clean Energy PACE Program bylaw as documented in 18-130 and proceed to second reading of the bylaw at a council meeting to be held on October 9th, 2018, and authorize staff to publish all public notices pursuant to Section 168 of the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fougere beat you again.
That's good.
Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Any questions on the second part of that before we put the motion on the floor? Is someone prepared to make a motion and then we can discuss?
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the maximum PACE financing limits for participating properties in the Clean Net Zero program as follows. A, all eligible properties, regardless of property value at the time of signature on the PACE customer agreement, shall be eligible for PACE financing up to $15,000. And B, eligible properties with full assessed property values greater than $100,000. I need to start wearing my glasses. At the time of signature on the PACE customer agreement shall be eligible for PACE financing up to the lesser of 15% or full assessed property value and $45,000.
Have a seconder. Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion?
Question?
Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Proposed amendments to the land use bylaw for outdoor furnaces. There's some tidying up to do, I guess. There's pieces of outdoor furnace equipment, like boilers that aren't currently in it.
Ms. McDonald would love to brief you on that.
Yes. Actually, I'm going to ask Nelson Nolan to come up. So Nelson is our planning and sustainability intern, and he's been taking the lead on crafting the housekeeping amendments that are before you. So he'll give a very brief overview of the key information, but no, there are not pieces of wood boilers all over the place. But I'll let Nelson provide the summary.
Good evening, Honourable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Councillors. So the Planning Department initiated this amendment to outdoor furnace provisions in the land use bylaw to ensure that residential wood boilers installed in the future meet particulate matter emission standards recommended by provincial and federal regulatory agencies. So what are wood boilers? It's a good question. So wood boilers, or hydronic heaters, are outdoor appliances used to heat homes and water by burning solid fuel such as wood or other types of biomass. Why is the installation of wood boilers in residential areas an issue? So smoke from hydronic heaters or wood boilers can be a nuisance to homeowners and surrounding residents if they are not designed and used properly, particularly older and less efficient models. Older models pollute more than newer certified units and usually have low smokestacks, causing pollution to accumulate near the ground instead of being dispersed into the atmosphere, which has a greater impact on neighboring residents. So while residential wood boilers are infrequently used in Bridgewater, currently we only know of one that's been installed. This bylaw seeks to avoid any future nuisances that an increase in the installation of wood boilers could cause. So how does Bridgewater currently regulate wood boilers? So currently in the general provisions section of the land use bylaw, wood boilers are permitted to be located a minimum of 30 meters from any property line of a lot which they are currently located. And within town boundaries, they're permitted in any zoning district, subject to those standards. So the administration is proposing that any wood boiler that's installed meets current manufacturer's standards laid out by the Canadian Standards Association or the Environmental Protection Agency. This ensures that there's as little particulate matter pollution as possible. We also recommend the remaining section in the existing bylaw stay, and that's the minimum of a 30-meter setback of any property line on which the wood boiler is located. We also recommend that every single wood boiler that is installed have a chimney that extends at least 4.5 meters from the ground surface, and that's ensure that any smoke doesn't dwell and disperses into the atmosphere. And we also propose that the outdoor wood-fired boiler must use only clean, dry wood and biomass material approved by the development officer. And this is just to ensure that any matter that is burned cleanly and to reduce the amount of particulate matter that could potentially enter the atmosphere. Thank you for your attentive listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Questions from members of council? Councillor Graves?
Yes. So is the stack high enough when you consider the fact that Bridgewater is in a valley? Is that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Would that be taken into consideration?
I'm not sure if the atmospheric conditions would have a huge impact on smoke accumulating based on that, but it is something to consider. Some cities, such as Montreal, have had problems, especially in their river valley locations, with aggregating smoke. But otherwise, I'm not entirely sure about atmospheric conditions.
Sometimes around here, when you go for a walk at night, you can really smell the wood smoke. It's quite noticeable. So just the fact that we're in a valley, I just think it should be considered at least factored into the calculations.
Sure. So with the combined setback and smoke stack height requirements, that should be enough to avoid any accumulation of smoke, that's going into windows or into people's backyards that might cause any irritation or negative health outcomes. But
I think I read here that there's a minimum of 5. One particular municipal unit does 5 meters. Doesn't mean that there couldn't be even higher than that. So I'm just throwing it out there. And I think
Right.
I think the question should be asked of someone in regards to the higher stack.
Sure. Yeah. I think so. This is based on a model bylaw that's was created by Environment Canada in 2006. So I think it was created with the intention that if it was applied anywhere in Canada, it would meet the most basic kind of standard to ensure that air quality was.
I'm just saying that we're a unique community.
Right. Yeah.
River Valley.
Right.
But I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion?
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give first consideration to the proposed text amendments of the land use bylaw as contained in Appendix B of Document 18-131 and schedule a public hearing on Monday, October 9th, 2018 during the regular meeting of council beginning at 6 p.m. in council chambers of Town Hall.
Can I have a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Tanner, any further discussion? Hearing none.
Question?
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is recommendation of the Director of Finance, permanent financing. Our Director of Finance is not here. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I was waiting for someone. It's not late. Anyways, recommendation of the Director of Finance for permanent financing. And this is for projects, downtown plan implementation, wastewater treatment plant, shaft replacement, street upgrades, sidewalk upgrades, North Parkade repairs, street sweeper truck, Pinecrest subdivision, storm sewer, fire truck, pace. So these are things that happened in the past, but we require at a certain point to make permanent financing. And I know that Councillor Thorburn loves reading these whereas, there be, I knew you were. So Councillor Thorburn, would you be so kind as to put that motion on the floor, please?
Thank you. That whereas Section 91 of the Municipal Government Act provides that a municipality is authorized to borrow money subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, hereinafter the Minister. And whereas the resolution of council to borrow for various purposes was approved by the Minister on January the 30th, 2018. And whereas Clause 91-1B of the Municipal Government Act authorizes the council to determine the amount and term of and the rate of interest on each debenture, when the interest on the debenture is to be paid, and where the principal and interest on the debenture are to be paid. And whereas Clause 91-2 of the Municipal Government Act states that in accordance with the Municipal Finance Corporation Act, the mayor or warden and clerk or the person designated by the council by policy shall sell and deliver the debentures on behalf of the municipality at the price, in the sums, and in the manner deemed proper. Be it therefore resolved that under the authority of Section 91 of the Municipal Government Act, the town of Bridgewater Borough, by the issue and sale of debentures, a sum or sums not exceeding $1,227,000 for a period not to exceed 10 years, subject to the approval of the minister. That the sum be borrowed by the issue and sale of debentures of the town of Bridgewater in the amount that the mayor or warden and clerk or person designated by council deems proper, provided the average interest rate on the debenture does not exceed the rate of 5.5%. That the debenture be arranged with the Nova Scotia Municipal Finance Corporation with interest be paid semi-annually and the principal payments made annually. And that the resolution remains in force for a period not exceeding 12 months from the passing of this resolution.
Seconder. Councilor McDonald, any further questions? This is kind of regular business for us, what we do when we have to finance things. And hearing no questions, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Next item is donations to the South Shore Fieldhouse Society. This is, again, this is not I always have to clarify this for the public. It looks like we are making a donation to the Fieldhouse Society. We are not. What happens is if people make donations to the Fieldhouse Society, they bring them to the town so that they can be issued a charitable tax receipt. We collect those and at a certain point in time, then transfer those back to the Fieldhouse. So this is not our money that we're giving to the Fieldhouse. We are just kind of the conduit for it. So I just want to make that clear, because one time I didn't, someone called and said, I thought you already made a donation to the Fieldhouse.
May I be excused? I have another meeting at 7:30.
Yes.
I'm in uniform. I thought we may get done a little bit soon, but we had a full docket. But if I could, I'm required at the zone
Yes.
meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Thorburn.
Thank you.
Anyone prepared to put a motion on the floor? Councillor Frazier?
Yes, Your Worship. That Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approved the grant in the amount of $9,600 to the South Shore Fieldhouse Society for the multi-use facility on Glen Allen Drive as per document 18-128.
Have a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Tanner. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Report of the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program for July 2018 is in your package. I don't know if anyone had any questions or comments on that. Is there really for information? No? Hearing none? Okay. Oh, I wish we got to this before Councillor Thorburn left, but next item is Museum 2.0 proposed concept endorsement. And I guess Mr. Hurdle is going to come and give us a presentation on behalf of the...
Do you want it, or do you want to just make the motion?
Is it a brief presentation? We've kind of we've already endorsed the Museum 2.0 concept around the council table. So really, this is to free up some money to push this forward, I guess, is really what this is about.
Well, we were looking for, I think, formal endorsement of the concept and principle to shape the framework for museum programming and budget planning going forward tonight.
Do you want to give us the highlights?
Sure. The Coles Notes version, we can just slide ahead really quickly. Basically, the core concept is that the museum needs to move forward from the static exhibit model that's typical of museums of the 1960s and 70s. It needs to be something that's more engaging if it's going to continue to be an asset for our community and is going to continue to captivate the public's interest or perhaps reinvigorate the public's interest. And essentially, the Museum 2.0 concept is something that's been embraced by other museums across North America, and it revolves around the notion of not just preserving your built heritage and your artifacts on site, but that the museum also becomes a cultural hub, that it becomes a place where public art can go on display, where cultural presentations can take place, and that it really becomes this multifaceted venue as opposed to just strictly a glass case for built heritage. So the Museum 2.0 concept, and I'll just draw you to the at-a-glance bullet points there. Maintain the museum's role as a heritage center. Expand the museum's role as an art and culture hub. Museum 2.0 aligns with Council's community growth vision. It's about maintaining municipal funding at the 18-19 level, so we're not actually coming to you with a plan that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars or anything like that. Museum 2.0, we also want to maintain the museum's status and achieve full CMAP, so provincial funding. That's very important. Those dollars help to keep the museum running each year. Museum 2.0 would also see active pursuit, partnership opportunities to increase revenue, and then potentially reinvesting that money in the museum, whether it's in programming or whether it's in facility upgrades, that sort of thing. There are opportunities there. And things on the horizon as well. It is a 50-year-old building, and as we have seen with other examples tonight, the older those buildings get, the more needs there are down the road. Part of CMAP funding is keeping the museum open and accessible year-round and programming available, so Museum 2.0 would help to ensure that too. We're essentially pitching a very similar model to what we would have seen in 2017-18, where there's a full in-season museum presence from May through October, and then from October through around April it would be available to the public with limited regular hours, but also available for special events or available by booking. And of course, too, as you're all aware, we've had a really integral role in running and operating Wildcard Mill on behalf of the province over the past number of years, and Museum 2.0 would see that relationship continue as well. We'll just draw your attention to a couple of staffing changes that are associated with the Museum 2.0 concept. One is that the communications lead, which is my position, would transition into the manager of community attraction and communications. So that individual would have a more active role in overseeing the staff at the museum site. That's essentially the shift in responsibility there. Our museum director would transition and become our Culture, Heritage, and Events Coordinator, CHE Coordinator. Again, in season during your typical May to October tourism year, that individual will be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the museum, as is the case now. What we would see during the off-season is that there would be a focus on events development. You know, one of the ideas that's been pitched is the concept of doing a winter flagship event for Bridgewater. That's something that we don't really have here outside of Christmas on the Lahave, so there's an opportunity to maybe explore a winter carnival concept. We also know that there's more funding out there, that there may be an opportunity to work with other organizations in the community to leverage grant dollars, and that's something that could certainly be a pretty big pillar of that position as well. What we're sort of suggesting is in year 2, there are opportunities to perhaps have the Canada Day coordinator and the summer events coordinator shift in terms of who they report to, and that perhaps they could report to the CHE coordinator, as we see, or we believe that there's a lot of natural overlap between what the museum could be doing in terms of its reach in the community and its growth of events and attraction development, and what we're already seeing downtown. Music Along the Riverbank has been a huge success, and we feel that there's a lot of, again, embracing the cultural aspect of it through Museum 2.0. There's a lot of natural overlap there. And then further out in the future, there's an opportunity to transition the curator position into that of a museum administrator who would be less involved with collection maintenance and would be perhaps more involved with programming at the museum, while still giving the Museum Commission and Council to have the flexibility of having a curator on site by honorarium as well. So it's all about basically expanding and extending what the museum does in the community, while at the same time still maintaining the museum's historic reputation as being a center for heritage in Bridgewater. And this just goes over the impact on museum operations, which we've essentially already talked about in terms of the staffing. One of the things I would draw council's attention to is that, as you're aware, HR policies require that there be at least 2 staff or personnel present at all times. So when we're looking at the off-season, if we have a CHE coordinator and our curator on site, if one of them has to take time off, we have the flexibility to engage the Museum Commission or Friends of the Des Brisés Museum, or even potentially other town staff, where I work is sometimes kind of flexible, to ensure that those open hours can be maintained and that we have 2 bodies on site. So ultimately, the Museum 2.0 concept will allow the Museum Commission and Town Council to work collaboratively toward achieving their respective goals. The Museum Commission will have a renewed, vibrant, active museum space that promotes and conserves our local heritage and is accessible to the public effectively throughout the year. And at the same time, Council's stated priorities of increased financial sustainability and more collaborative activities between the town and our community partners to promote and develop cultural events will also be met. So this is the next step portion of this, which is we're seeking, as I said, Council's endorsement of the concept and principle tonight, and that concept would then inform budget and programming decisions made by museum staff and the commission going forward.
Great. Questions from members of council? Councilor Graves.
So I certainly appreciate the outreach component. And I'm just wondering, the South Shore Regional Library has a tool called Community Collections. And what you do essentially is you take pictures, high-res pictures of items, create a story around them, so it essentially becomes a virtual museum. And I'm just wondering if that plays into any of this. So that may be reducing the collection, increasing the footprint, so you've got more floor space for art, for other activities.
Yeah, absolutely, Councilor Graves. That's something that, whether it's the South Shore Public Libraries or whether it's any other community organization, the Genealogical Society is certainly another one that comes to mind. that there are partnership opportunities out there that traditionally the Desbrisay hasn't necessarily taken advantage of. And certainly moving to a virtual collection, I know that there's always this fear that, oh, if we don't have folks coming through the door at the museum, if we scale back the collection, we could lose our attendance numbers. But the truth is that we could, you know, as you said, sort of re-envision what we're doing in the museum space and have computer terminals set up, have sort of a digital engagement space where folks could come in, and whether it's checking out the Desbrisay's collection or whether it's working with those online archives that are available elsewhere, there's still plenty of reason for folks to actually come to the museum space and capitalize on sort of that 21st century technology that is out there.
So is there that partnership yet between staff at both organizations, so the Scotia Public Libraries and the Bridgewater Desbrisay Museum? Have there been those connections yet?
Well, not officially yet. You know, sort of those low-level conversations are always kind of taking place in the background when you're developing a concept like this. But we were focused when developing Museum 2.0 on making sure that both council and the Museum Commission were engaged for their thoughts on the process first, and that we found something, a way forward together that was good for both parties. And we think that we've got that now, and that once council officially endorses this tonight, the Museum Commission has already endorsed the proposal. We can begin working on building those collaborative relationships in the community.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Todd.
I just need to clarify, so the physical site of the Desbrisay Museum,
Yes.
it will change in its setup, so some space will be set up for art exhibits, and so will it be kind of sectioned off? Is that kind of what you're looking at? I know you haven't
Well,
gotten
these-
to intense detailed planning yet
Yeah.
at this point, but, so the physical site, you would anticipate changes in how that's operating, and
Yeah, to be quite honest,
okay.
I expect that there will be some changes, and I know that that Lynette de Montre, our museum director, who would stand to be our CHE coordinator, has expressed a desire to sort of revisit the appearance of the museum. And I know in conversations that I've had with members of the Museum Commission, several have remarked that the way the museum is laid out really hasn't fundamentally changed in 20 or 30 years. And that there's an opportunity. We've had a couple of shows in there. I know that Crystal Retief, one of the local Mi'kmaq artists, has had some of her items on display in a gallery-type environment in the museum before. And I expect that Museum 2.0 is the kind of thing that would allow our museum staff to explore more of those kinds of partnership opportunities with local artists, and that would probably, yes, involve sort of re-envisioning how the museum floor space can actually be used.
Councilor, CEO, I'll just jump in for a second.
And on that, it's really about creating a whole lot of new, innovative ways for interaction at the museum, so that we have a lot more visitation in different ways, in different things, and really embracing through those networks, whether it's through the library, the culture and creative industries community, First Nations community. We've got a lot of opportunity with that space to, with Unleashed on 2.0 to do those things. We can do a lot of different things inside that box.
can I add a supplementary to that?
Yep.
Is it enough space?
Yep.
I can see outgrowing that building very quickly with all the potential that exists for this. Is it the right space?
Mr. McClellan.
So 2.0 is also just as much about getting out of the building. So the Desbrisay
Okay.
Museum is not a building, it's a collection. So
Right.
if we're showing at places like the Bridgewater Mall or vacant
great,
places
yeah.
on King Street, that's what really this concept that Patrick's packaged is about, is really getting outside of the norm and
Okay.
breaking the boundaries.
Excellent.
A good example of that too recently is the Glow Walk. That was a town event that Parks and Rec was doing on their own, and we got wind of it and said, well, what a great way to sort of involve the museum, to have the museum bridge the gap from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. when the Glow Walk began. So we had the doors open that night, we had musical entertainment on site, and it just sort of really augmented what was already going to be a really great event and made it much more enticing for the community, I think.
That was fun.
Councilor Graves, you had a question?
Yeah, so does the provincial government have an appetite for funding or providing grants for museum reconfiguration, which could be expensive, for some of the outreach things? And certainly the Glow Walk was cost effective, but there's going to be other things that are going to require sums of money. And are they receptive to grants?
I would suggest that, while we haven't had conversations with the province or the feds, that the Museum Commission is comfortable that everything is on the table right now in terms of what we can do to enhance that space and make it more compatible with Museum 2.0 going forward.
And just to be clear, we've had discussions with communities, culture, and heritage staff. This Museum 2.0 concept really will enable us to maximize our opportunities for other funding streams and even maintaining and doing well with the CMAP programming. This is what they're looking for through that program, is true outreach and beyond the traditional way of delivering museums.
Are there other museums in Nova Scotia adopting the concept?
There's a good example in Lake Charlotte. What's the name of the museum there? Do you remember?
Oh, shoot, not off the top of my head, no.
Yes, so Google.
So there's going to be collaboration with the other museums within Nova Scotia or beyond?
I think what I like about this concept, and when we put the motion on the floor, I will be supporting the motion. I like it because, to me, the museum becomes fluid and flexible. And I'm not sure we were there until we got to Museum 2.0, where there was a recognition that, to the CAO's comment, the Des Brisés Museum is not the building. The Des Brisés Museum is the collection. And that collection can be moved around the community. It can shift and it can change. It can be art. It can be anything that we want it to be. And while, yes, I get a little nervous when we talk about museum reconfiguration and the cost of that, but I also recognize that if we can't do something, we can do something else now, where I don't think we saw that potential. I think we, for many years, were locked into, these are the four walls of the building. This is how it's set up. So I find the Museum 2.0 concept quite exciting because I think it's, attach 2.0 to anything and it just seems like an upgrade. And I see this as literally the upgrade of the museum. But for now, the only dollars are to have the staff person that's in there now, who's done a phenomenal job of linking with the community and as Mr. Hurdle said, with the Glow Walk and just seizing the opportunity. I see that this is the first step to really start to shift that facility. And so for someone who has really wanted to see change in the museum because I felt like we had to shift or it was going to die, and now I see that this is the shift and the potential is, I think it's huge. It can be huge. Everything will come back to it. Like they can't spend, not going to spend money without us coming back. So to your points, Councillor Graves, and I think they're very valid. When there's money to be spent, then grants should be applied for and partnerships should be sought from our neighbors. And we did see Municipality District of Lunenburg contribute this year to the museum. So hopefully that momentum will continue. But as I said, once we get the motion on the floor, I will be supporting the motion because I think this is the first really big step to something really special.
And just to be clear, museum reconfiguration doesn't necessarily mean hard physical construction costs too. It could be something as simple. I know one of the things that's been talked about with the commission is moving the research space from the back of the building up towards the front of the building and just making it more accessible to the public and creating an atmosphere that's more inviting to Bridgewater residents and to the residents of Lunenburg County, because as you noted, Your Worship, this really is, it's a community and county-wide museum, not just for the town of Bridgewater.
Councillor McDonald.
How do we fund an over expenditure?
We find money elsewhere. There is money that we've saved in other decisions that we've made. So Lumberjack's decision and a couple of others. We don't have a marketing coordinator at the LCLC. So we have saved some money. And Mr. McClellan has some work to do if this motion passes to find some other money.
And the snow plowing budget's going to be good to us this year, right?
It's not going to snow this year.
We're delaying that.
The rest of this calendar year. Is anyone prepared to put a motion on the floor?
Sure. We move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the Museum 2.0 model in principle and further approve the over expenditure of the Des Brisés Museum Commission budget of $23,000 as per document 18-089 to enable the continuation of the museum director appointment.
Have a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Tanner, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We're actually going to defer the next item, and it's not time sensitive, and so we're going to defer that. We do have an in-camera meeting immediately following this. I did mean to read part of this letter that was received today at the top of the meeting, but I'll just quickly read it. For those of you who know, there was an event downtown this weekend, fundraiser for the Universal Cheer. They held it in the town center parking lot, and this morning we received a letter from them thanking not only the community, in fact the opening line is, "I love living in a community where the community helps its residents the best it can." That is a great opening line for a letter. But also thanking staff, Patrick Hurdle, Nick Brown, and Lisa for their advice and assistance, and in fact it says they'd be lost without them. So I just wanted to applaud our staff and the community that showed up. Apparently it was a very successful event. Our acting chief is here, and he was all smiles about it. So it seemed like overall a successful event, and so good for Universal Cheer and the community and for staff. So thank you for that. And before I adjourn the meeting, I just want to thank you all for your patience. We kind of bounced around a little bit tonight. One of the things I really appreciate about this council is its flexibility and its willingness to maybe not always follow the set procedure. So when we had a young lady who wanted to speak and she had something on her mind, it was important to hear that. And so I really appreciate council's willingness to say, yep, we can stop for a minute. We don't have to stick to the 2 minutes. What she had to say was important, and I think it goes a long way to building that confidence in our youth that one day when they're in these leadership positions, that's how it starts. And so thank you very much for that. And for the members of the public that stayed through all of that, thank you. Motion to adjourn. Mayor Tanner, Councilor Gray, we are adjourned. Still next door? Yeah.